Great, let's get started. Welcome to Asset Powered Achievements, implementing site-level initiatives to drive NOI, reduce energy, and accomplish ESG goals. My name is Natalie Stanley, and I'm an ESG account manager with Conservice and your host today. In today's webinar, we'll be discussing site-level improvements that you can implement at your properties to strengthen NOI, improve energy reduction, and support ESG goals. The speakers today will share their experience, success stories, and challenges they've faced, review best practices and approaches they've implemented, provide strategies for overcoming common problems, and discuss the role of these improvements in an overall ESG strategy. So before we get started, a few housekeeping items. This webinar will be recorded and distributed within 24 hours of the session. And then we'd like to do a Q&A at the end of the speaker presentation. So if you have questions, you can go to the GoToWebinar control panel in the questions section and type in your questions there, and then we'll answer them at the end. Okay, with that out of the way, I'd like to introduce our speakers today. We have Gabe Schwartz. He's the Vice President of Sales and Marketing with SiteLogic, where he drives expansion of turnkey energy efficiency programs with private sector national accounts. He is honored to lead a team of industry experts dedicated to transforming built environments and breathing life into the sustainability, financial, and ESG goals of real estate teams and corporations across the U.S. Before joining SiteLogic in 2020, Gabe spent 5 years scaling go-to-market teams at STEM, a global pioneer of AI-driven energy storage. And prior to that, he held various marketing, strategy, and business development roles in demand response, energy management software, and electric vehicles at Enernoc and Better Place. Gabe started his career as a management consultant for Bank of America, and he earned an MBA from the Haas School of Business at UC Berkeley. We're thrilled to have you here, Gabe.
Thanks.
Tim Zelazny joined Livcor's ESG team in April 2022 to help Livcor meet their corporate GHG reduction goal. His experience purposefully spans the field of architecture and engineering to understand and clearly communicate technical solutions. His accreditations include Certified Energy Manager and Certified Passive House Consultant. He is excited to be on this panel alongside two of Livcor's portfolio-wide vendors. Welcome, Tim. Healy Lev is the Chief Revenue Officer of ESG at Conservice and has more than 20 years of experience in architecture, commercial real estate, investment management, and ESG with private equity, REIT, and commercial clients. In her role, Healy leads the ESG commercial, professional services, and customer experience departments. Healy previously held a seat at the Gobi Board of Directors prior to their acquisition by Conservice, and currently serves as a board member for a private Chicago-based real estate SaaS company. Healy earned her bachelor's degree in architecture at University of Illinois and her MBA in international business, management strategy, and entrepreneurship from Northwestern University Kellogg School of Management. So welcome, everyone. We'll start with Gabe.
We're actually starting with Tim.
Yeah, that was a trick question. Well, Healy, I didn't know you were a fellow architect, so
no,
hello.
I didn't realize that. No wonder we're the same. We've got the same sort of strange running through our veins. We're both recovering architecture majors.
Both passionate about the environment, I'm sure,
yes,
as well.
Yes.
So yeah, high level, that's why I'm here today. I'm here to talk about Livcor's journey to reducing our greenhouse gas emissions. That's my extreme focus at Livcor, and also how having partners or portfolio partners like Conservice and SiteLogic is helping us meet those goals. Why is that? Because Livcor has a lot of assets. We are under the Blackstone family. We have over 400 assets to date nationwide, mostly in the Sun Belt region. And so having portfolio vendors is definitely helping us meet our goals as quickly as we can. And it's super helpful, and I'll be diving more into that. Our mission at Livcor is relationships are everything to us. And it just so happens that our relationship with the environment is one of our most important. With that, I'll go on to our next slide. It might take a while. There's a little bit of a lag. To begin with, I wanted to share LiveCore's goals. There are 3 things that I can highlight about our current goal. Number 1 is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 15%. Number 2, that is for our common areas. So outside of rentable square footage. And number 3, it is to meet that goal within 3 years of acquisition, starting with acquisitions in 2021. To tie back to our relationship with their environment, we do have future goals to do even more, to do better. That's another motto of ours, and we can share those once they're public. Our process is how we are achieving this goal of 15% reduction or targeting it. There's 3 pillars, and there's a specific individual at LiveCore that kind of manages each of these. There's measure, so measuring our greenhouse gas emissions along with conservice. There's reduce, that's me working with partners like SiteLogic to reduce our emissions, to be more energy efficient specifically. And then our 3rd pillar is replace. That's all about replacing greenhouse gas emissions with, or basically dirty energy consumption with on-site renewable energy. To dive into our first pillar, measure, it's not like we're being rocket scientists here, but want to walk you through kind of our process and let you know a little bit more about what we've learned in the process and lessons learned in later slides. So first pillar is measures. We are collecting our consumption through 2 portfolio vendors. One of them happens to be Conservice. Then we create a baseline using a Blackstone company called Retech. We are currently engaged with them right now. We do an internal QC of all this data to confirm accuracy and have a lot of rules set up to track that QC and alert us when things are array, because we have a lot of data. I think I don't even know how much, but it's a lot. Definitely more than the number of meters on this screen. And then finally with measure, we want to track our progress to meeting this 15% goal. It's a corporate goal. It's something that we will be sharing with stakeholders. And so we have an internal tracker to do that based off of current utility bills against our baseline. Our second pillar, reduce. So that's all about me. That's my world at LiveCore every day. To simplify it, I want to go through a case study. So that case study would be us purchasing a new asset, a multifamily building. Let's say it's like 200 units. And how we approach reducing energy consumption is when we purchase the asset, we immediately have an energy auditor come out to site. We have 2 different portfolio-wide vendors. They come out to the site and they identify which previously determined ESG quick wins, we call them, are applicable or something that we can do. So that could be LED lighting, HVAC replacement, VFD pool pumps, to name a few. And then from there, that allows us to see, based off of those savings of those ESG quick wins, if we're on track to hitting 15%. If we're not, those same vendors will provide further recommendations. In the world of energy, we call them ECMs or energy conservation measures to achieve 15%. And from there, we do our budgeting and execution to meet that goal within 3 years. At the same time, when we receive the energy audit, we get a lot of information about estimated savings. Again, that's kind of how we choose our path to hitting 15% reduction. With those savings, we're also tracking those in combination to see if we're going to be on track. So instead of waiting a whole year after implementation to see if we are on track, we're being proactive. We're inputting these savings day one just to see where we're at and to see if we might need to do even more good to reach that 15% goal outside of what was in the energy audit recommendation. And finally, we always look at incentives. We have a portfolio-wide incentive vendor. I forgot to star that in this slide to help us capitalize on any upfront cost saving. And finally, the last pillar, replace. This is not my area of expertise, so I hope nobody has some really difficult questions. If you do, I'll pass it on to Gabe. He'll be glad to field them. But we are also doing on-site renewable energy. Really, the big takeaway here is if that is of interest to your portfolio, carport's definitely one route that you could go, because if you have the available opportunity or square footage, pretty easy thing to implement. Rooftops, we try to tie our solar installations, if they're on roofs, with roof replacements. And there's a bunch of reasons why. I'm not the expert on that, but that is the recommendation.
And Tim, maybe just to illustrate your point, you mentioned before about how LiveCore is a very data-driven organization. You couldn't begin to articulate in words just how much data. Natalie, what was the stat from the meeting earlier this week? Something like 1.2 million rows of data just for a finite piece of ESG shipped year to date, something like that.
Just within 1 year, there's 1,068,508 lines of data pushed through our system from LiveCore.
In one small subset of ESG, so to highlight, to help you articulate, because I know you couldn't quite put into words just how data-driven LiveCore is and how informed their decisions are by data.
Yeah, we want good data. We love working with data. It's what is exciting to us. So, yeah. Opportunity-wise, I mean, data, but we want to automate, because we do have so much data coming in. Things change every day, and so we want to streamline what we're doing, and when it's smart to do so, of course. We also utilize our portfolio-wide vendors, as that's a great opportunity for us to help achieve the goal. And then, of course, just like everybody else, we've had our own challenges with procurement of equipment just due to supply chain issues. Nothing out of the ordinary here. To wrap up, success stories. Outside of what our mission is with our relationship with the environment, we can also pursue certifications like Energy Star certifications to market or share our success stories to the public through the rating system and plaques, and then also with our stakeholder GRESB scores. And so everything from these energy audits to kind of thinking about measures to reduce greenhouse gas consumption to implementing all goes into different areas of the GRESB score. I'm also not an expert at GRESB, but I know that Healy is, I believe. And so, yeah, with that, I'm going to pass it on to Gabe, and he's going to talk a little bit about, looking at my notes, common problems he's been seeing.
Thanks, Tim. That's really helpful. I think there's no better way to learn about this complex business of actually making these asset level achievements happen than to talk to a real asset owner who has a robust program in place. So really appreciate you sharing that with us. Before I get started, just a really quick snapshot of SiteLogic. So we help real estate owners and operators achieve rapid ESG impact by facilitating robust portfolio-wide asset level programs. So, we're proud to partner with LiveCore and many other leaders in commercial real estate across primarily the multifamily, industrial, retail, and hotel verticals. Some others as well, but I'd say that's the bulk of our work. As an organization, we do have a vision and a mission, and really our vision is to mitigate climate change by rapidly decarbonizing the nation's largest real estate portfolios. So, we feel that working with, really big, asset owners like LiveCore is the way that we can really make a difference. So with that, I'll get into some of the lessons that we've learned as we've helped several clients like LiveCore through their programs. So, first, I would say one of the most common problems that we see out there is that there is a lot of asset level ESG work already taking place, right? This is typically not new to any real estate owner or operator, but a lot of that work is actually leaving money on the table. So what we see is, everyone kind of knows at this point, or at least a large part of the market agrees that these asset level sustainability programs are good for the planet. They increase NOI, they improve property values, but there's some things that people don't know when they start getting into the thick of these programs, which is that an ad hoc approach to these asset level projects tends to result in really slow progress and a lot of missed opportunities. So there's kind of a maturity curve, and one of the things that is difficult is that getting a truly effective and measurable asset level ESG program started. So that's the type of program that Tim was just describing, that LiveCore is running, and generating both kind of the early impact and the ongoing impact that's required. It's kind of a slog. There's a lot of minutia, a lot of details involved in that, and it's difficult to coordinate. And so, one of the things that can really help as you're trying to get a big organization to start moving up the maturity curve, or turning in a slightly different direction, is securing quick wins is really important, because that's one of the ways that you can demonstrate that the ESG program is real and it's underway. So these are some best practices, and I'm not going to go through every bullet here, but this is a kind of a roundup of the 3 really keys to success from your peers in across several different asset classes, and really put these out there so that you guys don't have to reinvent the wheel. The first one is to try to manage this centrally. So Tim described a process where they have some portfolio-wide vendors, they have a strategy, a direction, and certain owners across their corporate team that really look over this for the whole portfolio. And that's a really good example of what industry leaders are doing. Taking central control of these programs means that, not to disregard the input of property management or things like that, but really to set a cohesive direction and then partner with the teams across the organization to bring it to fruition. So this includes things like building a playbook, that when you encounter different use cases at different properties, you kind of know what to do ahead of time. So you're not, taking up a lot of time to try to figure out what to do as you run across these different requests and inputs from the property teams. Reducing the number of solution providers so that it becomes manageable. And then, in the middle, I'd say the second real key to success here is that it doesn't have to be a trade-off between doing this quickly and doing it right. In fact, if you set up the program well, you'll actually do better in both of these areas, speed and sort of the quality of the results. And so this involves things like, creating a system that allows you to do, rapid assessments and prioritization that doesn't take, years of benchmarking and things like that before you can actually get the program going. There's a lot that you can do quickly. I think that doing this at scale especially with a portfolio that's the size that Tim just described, right? You've got to stay really organized, and it's really important that you leverage the volume that you're undertaking to increase your buying power and other types of efficiencies that can speed up the supply chain to actually deliver these asset level improvements. And then finally, making it measurable is a really big key to success. So taking the time up front to set up that data infrastructure, Make sure that you have internal and team members as well as partners and vendors who are set up to really track key data points and make that data available. So one interesting thing is, we've learned not just to track data about the end results, but track data about the process, right? How long does it take to, go and do an on-site assessment? How many of those are in progress at any moment in time? Things like that can be really helpful to understand not just what's coming out of the program, but how to make it more effective as you move forward. So, once you collect all that data, and I'm sure Healy's going to talk a lot about this, the data is really what tells stories, and sharing it and making sure that it's not difficult to share, to summarize and analyze and share that data with all kinds of stakeholders is a really big key to success. So I'm going to dive into a couple of those points just with a little more depth and just talk about, kind of what this looks like in the real world. So this is what a typical process might look like if you're trying to launch one of these asset level programs across the portfolio. The first thing is, a little bit of extra time on the planning up front can actually deliver huge benefits later downstream when you're executing the program. So setting up that strategy at the central corporate level, what are the goals? Who are the key stakeholders that need to be partnered with? What are the best practices that we've already learned from others in the industry? And then, of course, that data infrastructure. Moving forward from that point, the next step isn't to just send everyone to hundreds of buildings to see what they can find there. That can be a pretty time-consuming and potentially expensive process. But instead, do some of that analysis at the portfolio level first. Collect all the basic spreadsheet level data that you have, collect whatever utility data is available, send short questionnaires that are easy to answer to the property teams. Gathering that data and then having a process to quickly analyze it, really a purpose-driven analysis, not sort of what's everything that we can learn and how do we fill in all the data gaps, but more where do we see the low-hanging fruit? And if at rough order of magnitude, if we were to pursue all of these opportunities, how much would it cost? Those types of questions can really set the tone for the rest of the program. Once that is done, now you're really aiming well at the highest opportunities, and you've had some time to develop a process. You can go into what we call the program planning, which is sending technicians to individual properties to do detailed assessments, coming up with budgets, making sure that you understand where those fit into the capital planning cycle. It could extend out multiple years if there's a lot of opportunity in the portfolio, and then running some procurement mechanisms to make sure that you're getting the best possible pricing, and then finally setting some schedules so that the whole organization is aware of the initiative timeline and what they can expect to come out of it. And then finally, after all of that work, you move into implementation, which is this is the part that I think a lot of people start the process thinking about. Doing these prior steps will really put you in a much better position to go in and it becomes a very fast process. So like using LiveCore and Tim's team as an example, once it gets to that point where there's a shovel-ready scope of work available for a particular property, it's a very fast turnaround, and sometimes dozens of those projects will be approved within the time frame of a week or two. And so that doesn't become a long drawn-out process to actually get these projects that have been planned and scoped correctly, and now it's just a matter of getting them implemented at the actual asset level. So another thing that we talked about is really being organized and being measurable. So a lot of that work is left up to the conservice of the world, and Healy's going to talk a lot about it. But while you're actually implementing projects at the asset level, it is really important that you start collecting the data there. For us, this is just a quick snapshot of a few of the program management tools that we use as an organization, where we're tracking the whole portfolio so that there's always a big picture view of what's been done, what hasn't been done. All of those, looking then at opportunities that have been specifically identified, project opportunities. How much are they going to cost? How much are they going to save? What stage of analysis are they in? Is it a rough order of magnitude budget, or is it an actual scope of work that's been designed and quoted, right? And keeping track of all that as it goes along. Projects that are actually underway, there could be quite a large number of projects underway at any given time. And so to make it easy for the owner or operator groups to keep track of all that with their teams, it's rolling up all of that data. How many projects are underway? Where are they? What percentage complete? What's their expected completion date and things like that? And just keeping tabs on all of that so that the program always feels like it's tightly controlled. And then, of course, at the end of it, what are the results of the asset level projects that have been implemented, and being able to accumulate that over time, and also to slice and dice it any which way, by region, by fund, so that we can really say, hey, what are we achieving from all of this work and all of this in these investments that we're making. So if you shift from this ad hoc approach to this more strategic and centralized and measurable asset level program or programs that we've been describing, you get some really helpful benefits to the organization out of that. And this is what we've seen across LiveCore and many other similar clients in the industry, that delivering rapid impact, as I kind of said at the beginning, getting some wins on the board quickly. And then once the program scales up, being able to move through large portfolios in timeframes that actually align with the publicly stated objectives or just internal goals that the company has set, will go a long way to overperform against investor and other stakeholder expectations. Of course, making properties more valuable is a constant goal of everyone in this industry. And so, by having a more cohesive and standardized program, you're going to get a more consistent selection of, equipment and other solutions that really, last the test of time, that will actually produce good tenant experiences or resident experiences, and, really make those properties more competitive, because obviously, the tenants and the residents that are out there are looking at other properties and comparing what's available, how sustainable, how many amenities are there, and that is a key function of the business that this kind of a program can help deliver better results in that regard as well. And then of course, just growing and protecting the business. I think we've all come to realize that institutional and many other investor groups now are making, not just having an ESG plan, but having an actual ESG program that's functioning and robust. That's sort of tied to ongoing access to capital in the markets. And then not just your investors, but staying ahead of your tenant demands, and even finding new revenue opportunities in some of these ESG programs as well, through new amenities that are being offered at the properties. And so, finally, at the end of all of this, Tim has a limited team, and many of our clients have the same situation. There's only so many people internally who own this and who are thinking about this day in and day out. And so we want to help companies like LiveCore make the best use of their resources. And so, that slog that I was talking about earlier of collecting data, assessing opportunities, piecing together the business cases and managing all of these different projects and vendors, by consolidating and creating this centralized program, you'll be able to manage a lot more with a lot less of your team's time. So one of the last things I'll cover here is, just what are the types of asset level investments. Tim talked earlier about the quick wins, and we kind of see three major categories here. So you've got high efficiency equipment, and this kind of ties to LiveCore's terminology around reducing, right? So there are, there's equipment in the building that's consuming energy. Some of it's older generation, and if you bring it up to LED or high efficiency pumps or motors, replacing older toilets and other water fixtures with low flow, those are the types of things that can help you really reduce consumption. Of course, there's other decarbonization technologies. That's what Tim was talking about when he said replace, right? So on-site solar, we think EV charging is a really interesting, a lot of your properties are going to be the gas stations of the future. And so, thinking about that as, hey, we can actually replace fossil fuel burning vehicles with, vehicles that run off electricity, so that as we green our electric grid, then our transportation gets greener as well, right? That's a really big piece of the decarbonization story. And then ultimately, electrifying things, cutting the gas cord at the building level to replace gas appliances with electric. And of course, there's other smart building systems or just building systems like insulation, smart controls on your HVAC systems, smart controls on your irrigation systems. Anywhere where you might be wasting energy or water, is a good area to look at for asset level achievements in a program like this. So moving up the maturity curve is a really important way to achieve more and achieve more faster from these asset level programs. And so, really taking an assessment of where your organization is, in each of these areas. How do we set goals? How do we plan and budget? How do we identify projects? How do we make decisions about what to buy and invest in? And then ultimately, how quickly and how much volume are we pushing through the program, and what are the results coming out of it? We'll tell you about where you are today and what some of the things are that you can change internally in order to progress.
And Gabe, where would you say most customers on that maturity curve are that you guys encounter? Because I have my viewpoint or lens, but do you think they're starting, intermediate, or mature folks that come to you?
Well, we definitely encounter a wide range out there, and I think a lot of it depends on who the investors are, how big the company is. We've seen, I would say 5 to 7 years ago, most companies that we would come across, REITs and other real estate owners and operators, would be in the starting kind of category. We've seen a lot of companies move into intermediate, and some industry leaders move into mature over the last several years. So it's moving quickly, but I think no matter where you are on the curve, there's often some opportunity to, to do a little bit better, or to sort of just keep improving so that you stay ahead of others that are out there. So, I'll leave off with just a quick overview because I think Tim is a little bit humble, when he described his program, but, to really look at the scale of just one asset level program for LED lighting with LiveCore, 220 plus asset level upgrade projects completed or underway just within a 2-year time frame, 350 plus, on-site technical assessments completed or underway. Over 150,000 light fixtures. So this is a really high functioning program. And this is something that I think everyone could look at as a best practice to say, how could I get towards a more portfolio level, high volume program like that? That's really going to be transformative for my organization. I just wanted to highlight 3 things from our work with LiveCore, which is that transitioning from that ad hoc to that centralized approach it's not easy. It has to be done methodically, and LiveCore, of course, did a great job of that, building the process and the teams for a couple of major initiatives at a time. And as those initiatives mature, then looking at the third bullet, it's really looking at, okay, well, we've learned a lot from that first phase. What should we refine? How should we change the standards? Do we create extra documentation? What about the internal owners? Is this ready to move from someone who incubated this process to now someone who can just run it as a mature functioning program? Things like that, and just continuously examining those. And then, of course, in the middle, it's really trying to create a smaller, highly focused team of partners, both internal and external, that'll help you streamline things like data collection and just extend the reach of all your team members so that you can manage greater and greater scale as you go along. So with that, I would love to hand it over to Healy so she can tell us about how this ends up in the world of data, ESG programs, and reporting.
Yeah, and so thank you so much, and thank you guys both so much for sharing the overview, and I will talk about how it all comes together. But first, I want to mention why I'm specifically excited about these 2 organizations. So you have someone like LiveCore, and Tim said in his introduction, one of the most important relationships they have is that with the environment, right? So that's what's driving all this. LiveCore is not a box checker. They're not doing this to satisfy certain requirements and do the bare minimum. They're not doing it with ulterior motives of attracting investment or satisfying. They're doing it, it's in the heart and the core and the DNA of who they are as a company. And those are the folks that tend to see ESG as an investment that has ROI. versus a burden and a cost center, and it makes all the difference. And then separately, so only recently met SiteLogic following the acquisition of Gobi by Conservice, and was super excited to hear that, because we do have customers that come to us all the time and they say, we want to do stuff at the properties. You know, thank you for all that you do for our data reporting, our regulatory compliance, our voluntary ESG reporting, but help us do stuff at the properties, help us move that needle to get to net zero. And we're always trying to look for regional providers or network of providers. So SiteLogic is one of the first they come across that can kind of be that quarterback and spearhead the effort. And as Gabe spent a lot of time talking about all the benefits of having a centralized program. So excited, you know, to see it all to come together with a customer who's doing it for all the right reasons, is properly invested in ESG, and will see dramatic ROI and difference. And then a service provider, a partner for all of us that can actually help in a systematic, thoughtful way, streamlined and more efficient and more capital efficient. So anyways, this is kind of a culmination of many good things. I think at least with this crowd, I probably don't have to go too much into why we're doing this. It could be any and all of the reasons above. It can be a combination or a subset. But one thing I will say, I've been in ESG for the better part of 20 years, and I think the conversation has shifted. It's not so much the why anymore, but it's how am I going to do this, or what is the ESG story or journey that makes sense for me? Am I a poster child like LiveCore? Am I a box checker? Totally fine either way, but knowing who you are and what you're doing and why you're doing it. But few and far between now are the folks that say, you know, we're not doing it. We don't have strategy. So that's exciting for someone who spent, say, the first 15 years evangelizing the need for ESG and then trying to talk about our products and services. Now, at least that first part's done, and all I have to do is explain why we're the best at it, which is also easy. So our approach now with Conservice is truly the bill-to-boardroom journey. So one of the fussy parts of ESG reporting is that it's a lot of data. So you think of a portfolio of a couple hundred properties, several thousand meters, tens of thousands utility bills and data points that all have to come together, be aggregated and calibrated so that you can do the reporting in the first place. And as an ESG service provider, we spent a lot of time early on really just making sense of a bunch of data from disparate sources and trying to level set it and QA it. And it left little to no time left to do meaningful ESG strategy reporting, work with our customers on their KPIs, their goals for improvement, because it was just a mess of, an exercise in solving data. Now with Conservice, it's truly the bill to boardroom journey, meaning the bill's already acquired, it's going to be processed for payment. Conservice already has it, they've digitized it. All we need is the consumption fields off of it to then do the ESG reporting. Or to report back at the property level on ROI of an investment or project that you've made at the asset level, or aggregate all of that data to do a portfolio level report, whether it's for CSR or voluntary reporting like GRESB or Energy Star, or involuntary reporting like a local energy disclosure ordinance or building performance standard that's coming up. And then that informs decisions from all the way up to the boardroom that really started all the way down from the bill. And that's probably my favorite evolution of the space, is that 20 years ago, ESG was, the green team. It was, good job, green team. You put recycling bins in the break room, and you planted 12 trees this weekend. Good job, green team. And then it emerged or matured into what we called sustainability, a lot of building level certifications, but not so much strategy from top down, was kind of bottom up, to now where we've seen ESG as a mature concept that really starts in the boardroom and is a top-down initiative that encompasses and touches really every facet of the company, HR, legal, not just the physical assets and their energy, water, waste, and carbon use. So how we use the data. So as I mentioned, the nastiness in ESG is really in that data collection and bill acquisition, the ability to have a scalable, repeatable, accurate, and reliable data source, which we now have with Conservice. Feeding it into our system, we can then have all different sorts of outputs, whether it's voluntary or involuntary reporting, compliance, etc. So some of, as we call the ESG alphabet soup there on the right-hand side, a lot of it is going to stem from that utility data. And that being said, too, folks I know will look at that right-hand side and they'll say, wow, do I have to do all of these? Should I do some of them? How much do they cost? So that's part of what we do as well, is we'll help our customers figure out, where will you get the bang for your buck? What do you need to do? What are your competitors doing? How do you want to position yourself, and which one of these will help you get there? And that's the thing, no two stories are really the same. So that's part of it, is, having the roadmap and knowing what you're doing and why you're doing it, and that you're allocating budget effectively to have your ESG program be an investment that delivers ROI rather than a cost center. And to that point too, I'll add, I recently read an article about, so some companies are doing recession planning now, right? And this article was specifically through the lens of ESG. And you have some folks that are saying one of the first things we're going to cut, is a budget or an expense for our ESG program. Those people are not doing it right, because if you're doing it right, it's not an expense to cut. It would be, net negative to your organization, right? Because if you're doing it right, like LiveCore is doing it, it's delivering net savings. It's delivering reduction in energy. It's delivering reduction in operating costs. It's delivering reduction in tenant turnover, employee turnover, etc. So it's interesting, to see that perspective, and those who get it and those who I'll say don't. Oops, go back one. Okay, so we talked about, from our standpoint, as I mentioned prior to meeting SiteLogic, we had just a network of providers. They could be regional. A lot of our customers will still just leave this up to the operators. That could be a different operator in every region. That could be a single property manager. And just imagine, of course, the headaches. It's common sense, right? So many contracts, so many vendors, so much data to keep track of. It's difficult for many reasons. So I think Gabe did a good job articulating the why you would want one provider working across your portfolio. But I don't know that it makes sense, right? It's such common sense. And from our standpoint, from a reporting standpoint, the same way we talk about leveraging the bill data from Conservice for ESG reporting as a single streamlined QA'd source of ESG data for reporting. Similarly, now SiteLogic, we can get a single streamlined data source where the energy conservation measures that lead to different levels and points and certifications, as well as just the cost savings, right? From one single source and one common language and one single data input. And this is one of our several dashboards that's showing the user interface within the Gobi platform, where we're trying to track these measures, right? So you want to know how much money did you spend on the project, what was the project, what was the projected savings, and then what was the actual savings, right? So we have a methodology for tracking this. As Gabe mentioned, SiteLogic has similar dashboards that are more enhanced with regards to the types of projects being done. And that's wonderful and exciting for us, because prior, the only way to get this is really to collect it property by property by property, manager by manager, project by project. And it does become an exercise in herding cats, and it definitely compromises the data integrity of the data that you're collecting. Up close, in case the far away view was too far away. Okay, and then the reasons behind doing it. So I say box checkers. There's really nothing wrong with being a box checker. It's okay to know that you're a box checker. So at a minimum, if you own properties that are in these municipalities, you might have a requirement to disclose your energy usage annually to the municipality. And that's a perfect reason, to get involved with the provider. And now with the building performance standard coming out, you'll actually get fined if your buildings are not performing to a certain level or certain standard in certain jurisdictions. So benchmarking or compliance and avoiding fines is a great reason to get started. This is what I mentioned, the building performance standards. So it's starting, they're happening. And these are the kinds of things that, so if you look at, energy disclosure, it's not that hard, right? You just have to share your data with the municipality. You could do that kind of on short notice. Now, this is a whole different animal. You're talking about operating a property, a building at a certain level of energy efficiency. That's not something you can, like the month before it's due, whip together. This takes serious planning consideration. You have to think about the projects, where you're going to invest the capital, get the projects done, make sure you're meeting the benchmark. So this is a multi-year effort that requires a lot of planning, and the fines are a lot more steep than just a couple $1,000s, a couple $100s. So this is real and it's happening. The other thing I'll say, you might look at this map and say, it's just a handful. We have time. I don't have properties in New York or Colorado or Washington State, but I assure you, this map looked much like that map not that long ago. So these things, they continue to come out. They tend to be local and grassroots, regardless of what's happening, with the federal environment for ESG or otherwise. So it's coming, and we want to help everyone be ready for it. And then another reason, there are involuntary certifications. So no one says you have to do Energy Star, no one says you have to get the Energy Star label, but people understand that, number one, buildings that operate efficiently and do have a high Energy Star score are going to save money. And there also is a marketing or public relations or a tenant attraction retention benefit to something like having an Energy Star label at your property if your tenants are looking for that. I want to live in a property where, my owner cares about their relationship with the environment, like Tim said. And Tim, I'll be saying that for weeks to come, so thank you for that nugget. I love it. So there are other benefits there. And Energy Star is very simply, it's a 0 to 100. It's benchmarking your property against other similar properties of vintage and property type, and then you can apply for the award if you're above 75. GRESB is another one, so voluntary. A lot of the investors, especially the European GPs, require this, and what's nice about GRESB is it's kind of become the common language. This is what the GPs, this is what the LPs want. The GPs know that this is the language that the LPs speak. The operators know that this is the place where folks are going to ask for information. So it's kind of become a common language amongst real estate operators and owners, both public and private. And it ranks you amongst your peer group. So friendly or unfriendly competition tends to spark anyone into action, I suppose, but a lot of folks get very competitive about being first in their peer group or second in their peer group when it comes to GRESB. And it touches, all of these different facets, but specifically the topic we covered today about asset level performance and doing these projects at the asset level to drive NOI and to improve the operations of the assets are going to touch these aspects of GRESB. So, very much looks like more than almost half. Yeah. And that's it. So we want to save time for questions. You can use the chat or feel free to ask them aloud.
Thank you, Healy, Tim, and Gabe. That was very informative. We do have a few questions. The first one is, how are you measuring the soft touch points of ESG, especially the social aspects, since the environmental side is easy to measure with utility metrics?
Yeah, I can take that one. So sure, the E has always been easy, right? And especially within commercial real estate, you're talking about hard and fast KPIs. Energy, how much are you using? Water, how much are you using? Waste, how much are you generating versus diverting? Carbon, it's a measurable number, as Gabe was saying. So the social aspects, when you talk about, they're a bit harder to measure, but there's still KPIs that you can associate with them. So I'll give a couple examples of things that fall under the S. So one is like training and safety, number of safety incidents, right? So if you're training your people and you're ensuring that they're safe on the job, you can measure the number of incidents or accidents that happen. But in certain types of businesses, that's one example. Another thing is just measuring diversity within your employee base, within your management base, and on your board, right? So that also is a hard and fast metric. How many females do you have in management? How many minorities are on your board? Has that increased? Has that decreased? So that's an example of like a hard and fast KPI you can track under the S. So some of it is going to be like that, where you can associate KPIs with it just as you would under the E. And some of it is more about, do you have a policy and are you implementing your policy? So the S touches on, a bunch of different concepts, and I will say some are tangible that you can associate KPIs with and others are not. So I hope that answers that question. And then with regards to the G, it's kind of similar, though most of the folks I talk to with regards to governance and risk mitigation and proper internal audit and fraud control, most folks are saying, with the types of customers that we work with, like investment grade GPs and owners, that's table stakes. Like, you better be a good fiduciary of my money. You better have internal audit and fraud prevention and risk management. Otherwise, I wouldn't be giving you my money in the first place, kind of thing.
I'll just add one quick thing onto that. Electric vehicle charging and electric vehicles in general is one area where the E and the S kind of cross over at the asset level, right? Because of course you're helping to decarbonize transportation. At the same time, a lot of that is about equity. Like do people who live in apartment communities instead of single family homes also have access to this lower fuel cost mode of transportation that we call electric vehicles? Also, do low income communities that live really close to highways and things like that, are they entitled to clean air, right? So this is actually a really interesting area. You can get a lot of data about the usage of those EV charging stations at your properties and then contribute to that conversation as well.
Thank you both. Next question, do you have resources or information that could help me figure out financing for these kinds of projects?
I'll take a quick crack at that. Yeah, there are a lot of different types of financing available, and generally speaking, there's a lot of it. So the amount of capital that has flooded in to fund energy projects, solar projects, and things like that has actually increased pretty dramatically over the last 5 years. And there's everything from very simple lease financing, which is credit based and has a fixed dollar amount over a fixed term, just like you would lease a car or something like that. And then all the way to more complicated energy as a service models, which can actually take some of the performance risk of the technology or the project off of you, the owner, and leave it with a third party who's better able to manage it. And that can be a little bit more costly form of financing, but can also be more widely available. So lots of good options out there. And yes, companies like SiteLogic and I'm sure others can usually help to present those options to you in a neutral way and help connect you to the right financiers for these projects.
Gabe or Healy, either of you super familiar with the Inflation Reduction Act and the funding available through there?
I am not super familiar, full disclosure. We're keeping a handle on it. There are folks within our ESG department and Conservice at the larger Conservice organization that would be, so something we have resources to help with, but I personally am not self-proclaimed expert there. I don't know, Gabe, if you know more.
Yeah, just a couple points. I'm not an expert for sure, but and there's a lot that it was in the legislation, but exactly how it's implemented is still being determined. So I would say that there aren't exactly final answers. There's a lot in there that can help in these areas. Two that I'll just highlight that are meaningful are the ability for a real estate entity like a REIT that has a passive tax status to be able to take the federal tax credit on a solar project or a solar plus battery storage project, and then actually be able to monetize that. Whereas in the past they couldn't. Right now there's a mechanism for them to go sell that tax credit, and so that's an interesting way where if the other boxes are checked for you, that your organization may actually want to own those renewable energy systems yourself, whereas in the past you would always be looking at a PPA or some third-party ownership model. The other thing to note is in the electric vehicle charging space, there's a lot of funds that have been deployed through that program that will help to put, to subsidize more charging stations along transit corridors. That will also help to provide, to provide higher tax credits that can help offset the costs of deploying charging stations. When you're talking about an existing building, those EV charging stations, it's not just the cost of putting a station there, it's all the electrical upgrades that may be needed, to support it and things like that. And so any cost offsets that you can get are typically helpful because they allow you to build further into the future.
I love all these questions coming through. If we don't get to all the questions, we'll follow up with you through your email. Can you give some general background info on investment tax credits? What are the basic qualifications?
Yeah, probably an extension of the last question. Again, I am not a tax expert by any means. The general premise is that these tax credits that subsidize things like the purchase of an electric vehicle, the installation of an EV charging station, or the installation of a solar system on a rooftop or a carport, that the government is offsetting a portion, usually 30% or sometimes a little higher, depending on the location, of the actual project cost, can be offset in the form of a tax credit that you basically, when you're filing your taxes, as an organization, you'd be able to either take that credit or as I just described through this new mechanism, maybe sell that credit to someone who can use it more so than your own organization.
Gabe, you're doing a great job. It sounds like it might be a follow-up webinar.
Right.
financing.
Let's move on to the next question. How have you addressed collecting Scope 3 emissions information at multifamily residential buildings?
Keely, I'm going to turn that to you first.
All right, Scope 3 at multifamily residential buildings. So again, not a self-proclaimed expert. I know that, so I think Tim mentioned it earlier, there's a combination of, they want a scalable approach, they want to use data and technology, but there's still a human element that goes into ESG, right? It can't be completely canned into software. So when we think about Scope 1, Scope 2, Scope 3, Scope 3 is the one that tends to take, more of a human element or effort to look at the whole big picture of how we're tracking. Scope 1 and Scope 2, for example, are available within the technology and the software where you could log in and see based on your utilities and measurements that we have in there what your Scope 1 and 2 are. Specific questions about Scope 3, so other than what it is, I'm not as familiar, but I know that we do work with folks on mapping out their Scope 3, having strategy for Scope 3, tracking their Scope 3 as it pertains to their greater ESG program. But that's one, if you truly do have specific questions about it, I have 3 experts in mind that I would want to pull in to get you better answers than I can give at the moment.
Okay, next question. What strategy recommendations do you have for large portfolio companies to meet their GHG reduction goals?
That's, I mean, that is like the holy grail question. And a lot of folks are coming to us saying, great, my company made public proclamations to be net zero by X date. That's out there in the ether now. And it's me that gets to do it and figure that out. And one of the reasons we had this webinar is because you're going to have to do stuff at the properties, and you're going to have to get granular at the properties, and you're going to have to invest money into these projects at the properties to actually hit those goals. There are some things that you could do, but like buying offsets or RECs or things like that, but you're not going to buy your way to net zero, right? You can't just throw money at net zero. If you're really trying to be net zero, it's going to have to be a combination, right, of offsets and RECs and things like that, but then also actually reducing energy at your properties. So Tim, I don't know if you can speak more to that. I know LivCore has some targets around this. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, before I joined LivCore, I was on the commercial real estate side. And so entering multifamily, it was different for me. And I wanted to make sure that how I approached it, this goal was smart, was quick. And so what I did, or what I wanted to understand first, was what were my largest energy end uses? And a really great resource to figure that out for any building type, not every single one, but a large majority, is through the US Energy Information Administration, EIA.gov, and that will break out energy end uses by building type. And they are coming out with latest data for 2021 shortly.
Thanks, Tim. I think we have time for one more question. Can you point to any recent research that demonstrates the green premium for purpose-built residential buildings?
Not my area of expertise. Anybody else?
I don't have it at my fingertips, but there actually has been some really interesting research recently. I don't want to misquote it, so it's probably a follow-up item, but there was a big study that just came out that specifically spoke to this, and I thought, it had some findings in it that we had suspected as industry insiders for a while, but that were actually validated, that are out there. So yeah, maybe that's something that we could share as a follow-up.
Sure. Great.
Questions that are asked, by the way, all the webinars I've done, this is a sophisticated crowd we have today. So I'm excited. Usually the questions are very rudimentary, and I feel like me and the panelists can handle, but I love that you guys are knowledgeable and are asking these really tough questions.
With any remaining unanswered questions, we will follow up with those, as well as the recording and the slide deck. So thank you all for participating. Special thanks to Gabe, Healy, and Tim, and we hope everyone has a great day. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, guys. Take care.